One of these movies gave its director gangrene. One was a serious sci-fi epic until the budget collapsed and they made it a comedy to survive. Every film here flopped, and every one was a masterpiece nobody saw coming. Film Gorilla presents 10 box office bombs that became cult classics. Number 10. Most filmmakers spend millions making danger look real. The people behind Raw skipped the effects and used real danger instead. More than 100 lions, tigers, and leopards roaming free, inches from the cast. No CGI, no barriers, no plan. What could go wrong? Everything. Cinematographer Jan de Bont was scalped by a lion, 120 stitches. And then he came back to finish the film. That wasn't even the worst of it. Director Noel Marshall was attacked so many times he developed gangrene and spent years recovering, and was clawed by a cheetah trying to save the animals during a bushfire. Production dragged on for nearly 4 years. But here's the part that should make your skin crawl. Many of the terrified reactions you see on screen aren't acting. Those are real people trying not to get mauled. Raw lost a fortune, but today it's remembered as maybe the most dangerous film ever made. And our next movie became a classic without anyone being chased by a lion.
Don't make me kill you, tough guy.
Number 9. By the mid-80s, everyone had written John Carpenter off. His recent films had flopped and people said he was finished. So instead of playing it safe, he made one of the strangest action movies Hollywood had ever seen. Big Trouble in Little China cost around $25 million, and the studio rushed it out to beat a rival fantasy comedy, The Golden Child, into theaters. Here's the trick most people miss. Kurt Russell's Jack Burton thinks he's the hero. The audience thinks he's the hero, but he's actually the least competent person in every room he walks into. At one point, he knocks himself unconscious before the big fight even starts. In 1986, that confused people. Years later, fans realized it was genius. And the influence ran deep. The Three Storms inspired Raiden in Mortal Kombat, and Lo Pan inspired Shang Tsung. The movie bombed, but today it's one of the most beloved cult films of the decade. Coming up, a fantasy epic so ambitious they trained 16 massive horses for months just to get a few seconds of footage. Number 8. Everything about Krull was big. Big sets, big creatures, big effects, big ambition. The filmmakers wanted to go toe-to-toe with the biggest blockbusters of the era, and they built nearly all of it for real. The standout was the Beast. Makeup designer Nick Maley created what many consider the first fully self-contained animatronic suit, its lungs and heart moving internally with no external cables. The work was so advanced it stunned makeup legend Dick Smith. Then there were the Fire Mares, 16 Clydesdale horses trained for months. And here's a detail people love. Actor Bernard Bresslaw was already 6'7", and they still put him in lifts to make his character more intimidating. Despite all of it, audiences ignored Krull completely. But over time, fans came around to its practical effects and its willingness to dream big. Today, a lot of people call it the most underrated fantasy film of the 80s. And the next movie didn't just face bad luck, it went up against a monster, a little film called Top Gun.
Okay?
Yeah, everything's fine.
Number 7. Iron Eagle had the worst timing imaginable. It was built on fighter jets, military action, and aerial dogfights, and it was about to run straight into the most famous fighter jet movie ever made, Top Gun. Knowing they couldn't win head-to-head, the studio pulled Iron Eagle out of the summer and dumped it early in the year. It didn't help. The film struggled. But there's a haunting footnote. One of the movie's standout aerial sequences was flown by legendary pilot Art Scholl. Later that same year, Scholl was killed filming aerial footage for another aviation movie. That movie was Top Gun. A few things people don't know. The character Chappie Sinclair was inspired by General Daniel Chappie James, the first black 4-star general in American history, and a Tuskegee airman. And most of the fighter jets you see were actually Israeli Air Force aircraft, repainted for the camera. Critics dismissed it, but younger audiences didn't. On home video, Iron Eagle quietly became a hit and launched a whole franchise. Because sometimes a cult following doesn't start in a theater, it starts in a living room.
You had us out of here!
Number 6. Picture getting pulled over for speeding in a tiny town. Now picture turning that into a Hollywood fever dream, full of giant babies, deranged judges, and one of the weirdest sets ever built. That actually happened. In 1978, a rural cop pulled Dan Aykroyd over for speeding, and the night spiraled into a bizarre encounter with a local judge. Years later, Aykroyd turned that memory into a screenplay. Then he went further than anyone should. He wrote it, directed it, produced it, and played multiple roles, including the infamous giant man-baby, Bobo. It broke him. The makeup sessions, the directing, the acting, all at once. Even the cast was uneasy. Chevy Chase reportedly hated the script, but signed on out of loyalty to Aykroyd, and later said Aykroyd took most of the blame when it all came crashing down. When Nothing But Trouble hit theaters, nobody knew what they'd just watched. It became one of the most notorious bombs of its era. But fans of strange cinema fell in love with its sheer insanity. Love it or hate it, there is nothing else like it. And the next movie nearly didn't survive at all. It was supposed to be a serious sci-fi epic. Then the money disappeared.
Don't bite.
Number 5. The Ice Pirates was never meant to be funny. The original plan was a serious $20 million space epic, something to rival the biggest sci-fi films of the decade. Then reality hit. MGM reportedly slashed the budget to around $8 million and demanded major changes. So the serious epic became a comedy, and that desperate decision might have saved the entire film. With almost no money, the crew got ruthlessly creative. They recycled sets, props, and vehicles from older productions. Sharp eyes can spot pieces of Logan's Run scattered throughout. And some of the control room screens are literally just playing footage from Rollerball. They built a space adventure out of Hollywood's leftovers. Gene Roddenberry once joked the movie was responsible for bringing back the death penalty in California. Critics weren't kind, but audiences eventually found something charming in its scrappy chaos. A serious epic became a parody, a budget crisis became its personality, and fans embraced it for exactly that. Coming up, a movie built to launch an entire trilogy that audiences completely ignored. Number 4. Walter Hill wasn't trying to make a realistic movie. He was trying to make the coolest movie his teenage self could possibly imagine. Streets of Fire throws rock and roll, comic books, muscle cars, neon, and fantasy into one stylish package. Hill called it a rock and roll fable. In 1984, audiences had no idea what to do with it. It was supposed to launch a whole trilogy around the character Tom Cody. If it hit, the sequels would follow. It didn't hit, and the sequels vanished instantly. But the behind-the-scenes stories are gold. Amy Madigan was up for a completely different role, then convinced Hill she was better as the tough sidekick. He rewrote the part and created the unforgettable McCoy. And Hill was so taken with Diane Lane that he expanded her role mid-production. For years, it looked like a flop. Then cable TV gave it a second life, and audiences finally caught up to its style, its music, and its refusal to fit any genre. Today, Streets of Fire feels less like a failure and more like a movie that showed up years too early. And speaking of ahead of its time, the next film had sword fights powered by car batteries. Number 3. There Can Be Only One. But before Highlander became a phenomenon, it was just another risky fantasy film hunting for an audience. The biggest problem? Sean Connery. They only had him for 1 week. Every single scene with Connery had to be shot in 7 days. Connery reportedly bet the filmmakers they'd never finish in time. They finished, and he still walked away with a reported $1 million for 1 week of work. The effects are just as wild. When swords clashed and sparks flew across the screen, that was real electricity, fed through hidden wires in the actors' costumes, wired to actual car batteries. It looked incredible. It also sounds completely insane. Then there's Queen. The band was only supposed to write one song, but after seeing footage, they got so inspired they scored almost the entire film. Brian May wrote Who Wants to Live Forever after watching a single early cut. In theaters, Highlander struggled. On home video, everything changed. Fans found it, quoted it, shared it, and turned it into one of the defining cult films of the 80s. The next movie hides one of the greatest spoilers in film history right in the opening scene. Almost nobody noticed. Number 2. Imagine a movie that gives away its entire plot in the opening scene and almost nobody realizes it. That's The Thing. If you speak Norwegian, the helicopter pilot chasing that dog at the start is screaming the twist out loud. He's telling everyone the dog isn't a dog, it's the creature. The movie announces its biggest secret in the first few minutes. Most viewers just don't speak the language. And that's only one reason it's legendary. John Carpenter calls it his favorite film he's ever made. The practical effects alone earned it a place in horror history, and Rob Bottin was just 22 when he designed them. The work was so brutal, he collapsed from exhaustion and ended up hospitalized. Even the music has a strange afterlife. Ennio Morricone's score was nominated for a Razzie, yet years later, unused pieces from that exact score helped him win an Oscar for Tarantino's The Hateful Eight. It's so beloved among polar researchers that British stations in Antarctica reportedly screen it every midwinter. But none of that mattered in 1982 because The Thing opened against E.T. Audiences chose the friendly alien, the terrifying one lost, for a while. Today, it's considered one of the greatest sci-fi horror films ever made. And that leaves one movie, a film so influential we're basically still living inside the future it predicted.
Decker.
Number 1. Blade Runner might be the greatest box office failure in science fiction history. When it landed in 1982, nobody knew what to make of it. The pacing was strange, the world was dark and dense, and the questions it asked had no clean answers. Behind the camera, it was chaos. Ridley Scott was fighting the studio constantly and reportedly came close to losing control of the film entirely, with crucial scenes being shot right before producers stepped in. And out of that chaos came something extraordinary. Rutger Hauer's Tears in Rain speech, one of the most famous moments in all of science fiction, wasn't fully scripted. Hauer rewrote and condensed it himself, and that speech later became the title of his own autobiography. Author Philip K. Dick was so moved by Hauer that he called him the perfect Roy Batty. And after seeing Harrison Ford in costume, Dick said Deckard had finally come to life. Even the small details are legend. Joanna Cassidy looked so natural handling that snake because it was her own pet python. But the real legacy is the look. The rain-soaked streets, the towering ads, the neon, the architecture. All of it reshaped how filmmakers, artists, and game designers imagined the future for generations. Blade Runner failed, and then it refused to die. It grew and grew and grew, until it became one of the most respected science fiction films ever made. If there's a perfect example of a bomb becoming a masterpiece, it's this one. Every movie on this list proves the same thing. A bad opening weekend doesn't tell the whole story. Some came out at the wrong time, some confused everyone, and some were just years ahead of the room. But every one of them eventually found its fans. So which of these is your favorite? And what bomb do you think we left off? Drop it in the comments. If you made it this far, hit subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.